Hi, Peter Charles here, Hooked for Life Fly Fishing. And if you've seen my previous two videos on trying a new approach to catching trout on mayfly nymphs, you'll see I've talked about the concept itself and the leader. Now, in this video, we're going to get out and actually try and catch fish. And we'll see how it works. Now, the equipment I was using at the time was an NRX plus 8.5 foot 4-weight with a standard trout weight for line on it, a 4-weight line. And I took that rig for a specific reason, because I wanted to see how well it would work with a rod where I could switch up to a dry fly if I wanted to. Remember, you'd normally fish this during an emergence. You got a hatch going on, so you would be using this method when mayflies are doing this. So you might want to flip off to a dry at some point, so it'd be a good idea to go out with a rod that would be ideal for dry flies, which is the reason why I took this rod with me. As far as the flies are concerned, I tied up 3 flies specifically for this method, and they proved to be too light, so I switched off to my standard Euro nymphs, and I picked ones that had flexible tails. Other than that, they were just my generic Euro nymphs that I use all of the time when I'm just Euro nymphing. Some of the things I found out we can discuss right now is the fact that heavy flies are it. If your flies are too light, this is not going to work, because what happens is they go down too slowly. So you end up just, moving them a couple of inches. They need to have weight to drop, and you need the weight to stay in contact with them. So let's take a look at this. And I'm casting upstream first. I decided I was going to start with an upstream presentation. And I'm stripping down and waiting, letting it drop, strip, letting it drop, strip. And because I'm casting upstream, the current is working in my favor to make the fly drop. So I'm just doing a little setup here, and then I'm going to cast across the current, trying to get it close to that wood, and then I'm just going to strip it back. Now, right where you saw, I'll stop there for a second. Okay, right at that spot where you see the end of the fly line, I saw a trout come up and take an emerger. There's a very, very sporadic catch going on, just a bug here and there. And I saw it come up and go right back down again. So I wanted to run my fly across that spot a few times to see if I could get him to come back. As it turned out, no. So let's carry on. Now I'm downstream, and I'm using a typical lasering lift, and nothing out of the ordinary here. I'm just casting across the current, and I'll just cast it out, just a little single spade to pop it over there, close to the end of that wood pile, and then I'll just lasering lift it across. And so you could step down the run, stop this. You can step down the run doing that. So you cast across, lift, 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 take a step, cast across, lift, 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 lift. You could try that. And as long as you've got a really heavy nymph and the current's not too strong, that should work just fine, because you've got to allow time for that nymph to drop. And the one fault I was making during this process, I was rushing things a little too much. I wasn't giving enough time for it to sink, and I wasn't giving enough time, and sometimes my movements were a little fast, and these bugs don't go up like a rocket. So, controlling speed became an issue. So let's look at here. I'm casting across the stream, and I like this approach better. What I found that when you cast across the stream, I had more control. Now I'm leaving the fly line in the water and making some mends to try and keep it as drag free as possible, and then put in a strip. I'll stop that right there. So what's happening? I'm casting to the far side of that seam, and then I'm putting in some strips and mending so I don't get a belly forming into the fly line, which will pull the fly and keep the fly high the whole time, which is not going to work. So it sounds a bit counterintuitive. I'm looking for a drag-free drift out of my fly line so I can put some movement in the fly. But the idea is if your fly line's dragging, either it's dragging behind or dragging ahead, you're going to end up pulling the nymph high, and that's when it stops working. So you notice my fly line's on the water. Now this is because I'm using a short rod. I left the fly line on the water, so we'll see what happens here. And I'm just bringing it through, slow strips, and bang, the fish takes. And it was about 7, 8, more than that, 8, 9 inch brown. Feisty little fellow though. These are not stockers. These are stream bred browns, and they fight really well. And we're going to look at the take here because that's important. And I found this is true whenever I've been fishing a regular nymph and I've started to swing it and fish hit it. What I saw here is very typical. And so you don't have to worry too much about strike detection, because wait till you see what this little guy does when we slow it down. And you see in slow motion what really goes on. So here we'll see. I'm putting in just a little gradual strip here. I raise the rod slightly, and then look at the way this fish rips line. I mean, it really grabs, because I'm not moving anything right at this moment. See the line straighten and through the water, and only now am I moving. So you can see that fish took very hard. So this is very typical. So if you're worried about strike detection, the only problem you can get is on the drop. You have to keep an eye on the float, because if the float suddenly darts, you've probably had a fish hit. It's harder to hit them, feel them on the drop. But when you're putting them under tension, you feel it every take. You'll feel every bump, and you don't miss anything. So the idea is on the drop, watch the float, and when you're pulling back and lifting, you don't have to worry about that so much. So here I'm casting across. Now I'm going to use an upstream mend. And now I'm going to high stick it. I'm going to try and keep the fly line off the water as much as possible to avoid drag. 8.5 foot rod, not the best idea, but it does work. Now, I did get 2 more fish out of this run. Unfortunately, my GoPro decided to quit working as usual. What I did there, and I'll just back that up so you can see it. I used a reach mend despite all that wood in front of me. And the importance of the reach mend is what you have to watch out for is you don't want your nymph kicking upstream. So I have the wood, I'm having to work around the wood, and it causes my fly to kick upstream a bit. So I'm having to put a reach mend in as well to stop it from kicking upstream. Because in most situations, not all, or sometimes where you might want to do that, but in most situations, if it kicks upstream, it's going to be dragging the entire way and it'll never get down. And you want it down low to start with. So I'm using that reach mend and I'm high sticking, and you can see I'm just lifting it up and down. And again, I'm a little too fast here. I should be slowing down. And that's partly because I'm using a shorter rod. I'm trying to overcompensate for the shorter rod. So really just take your time with this up and down motion. And I got 2 more fish using this high stick method in that other run. So it's a method that will work quite well. So you've got 2 methods you can look at. Both are cross-stream methods. One is where you high stick and the other one is where you have line on the water. And the difference is basically this. When you're high sticking, you're doing it almost vertically. You get a bit of an angle. So your fly is moving like this. If you are allowing your line to sit on the water, it's more of a lateral movement with a bit of a drop. They both seem to work. So if you're out with a shorter rod, you might want to use the line on the water method. Or if you happen to cast fairly far because you can't get close to the fish, you can let line on the water. So this is the reason why I don't use a Euro nymph leader for this job. And the other reason why I don't use a Euro nymph leader is I have tried to do this with just a straight Euro nymphing leader, and when you drop, you put a lot of slack in it, and you really have to go down very slowly to avoid the slack. And when you go down very slowly, what's happening is you are using up so much time in that run that is unproductive. You might get 1 up down and you're done with it, and you have to start over. So I needed something that was going to keep the leader straight, and that's ironically what the float does. It keeps the leader straight, so as you drop, the whole leader drops together thanks to the float, adding just enough weight to keep the leader taut so you remain in contact. There's enough drag in that leader that when you drop it without a little bit of weight in the air to pull it straight, it doesn't really transmit the loss of tension to the fly immediately. It takes a little bit of time before it works its way to the fly, and you get that moment of complete slack. It was ugly. I suppose if you really worked at it, and fine-tuned it, you could probably get it to work just fine. But having that little float on and a shorter leader, it worked an awful lot better when you're high sticking. So the bottom line here is I got 3 fish that day and I lost 2 or 3 others. And most of them were on the high stick method. One was on the more of the lateral line on the water method. All of the fish I got were cross-stream presentations. So I didn't use the lasering lift downstream method all that much. I think upstream will work under certain circumstances. You have the advantage of when you drop tension that the fly drops without the current pushing it, trying to push it up. That's the one advantage to that method. The problem I was having is staying in contact in heavier flows. You cast into heavier current, and if your line gets into some soft current, it goes all squirrely on you, and you're messing with mends and everything else to try and keep it straight. You have to find the right current to get the upstream presentation nice and smooth and under control. The cross stream seems to be the easiest, the best, and I got got all of the fish on the cross stream presentation. So, and I would say that if you're going to go out with a longer rod, the high stick method is probably the one to look at unless you have to cast far. And if you're short with a shorter rod, don't worry about laying some fly line on the water. It does work. And as you can see by that hit, you don't have any worries about detecting the takes. Anyway, so that was my first attempt. Again, I was using an NRX Plus 4-weight, the 8.5 foot 4-weight. It's the LP version. And it's a dry fly rod really, and I took that because it would allow me to alternate between nymphing and dry fly fishing just by changing the leader. So give that a try. If you want to give that out, remember the important thing is to have a well-weighted nymph. It doesn't work with a light one. You want a little bit of a float or something on the leader right where the junction is between the fluorocarbon and the mono, nylon mono. And as I say, you don't have to worry about strike detection unless fish whack it. So give it a try. It's fun. And actually, this creek has been fishing very tough, very, very tough over the last few seasons. So this has actually been my best days in a few years on this creek. Usually, like you're lucky to get 1 or 2 fish because it fishes so tough. The population of trout has been dropping. So for me to be able to pick up these fish, as I say, 3 landed, I lost to 2 or 3 more. That's actually quite a good day, and I was only out for about an hour. So it's an hour's, a battery life worth of fishing, and I'm quite happy with the results. So we're going to keep on trying. No, we're not going to give up with this, and we're also going to look at the flies I use because I'm still working on developing a fly that's specific to this method. And I'm calling it Active Nymphing. I'm bad with names. Active Nymphing seems to be a decent name for it because we are very active with it. We're not just dead drifting the nymph. So, I don't know. It's working. Give it a try. I mean, if you've got a heavily weighted Euro nymph, get out there and if you've got a 10-foot rod or even a 9-foot rod, just work it and try and keep your line off the water as much as possible. But if you have to put line on the water, it's not a catastrophe. So, give it a try. Cheers.